Stop right there. Before you dive into this story, show me your support. Subscribe to the channel, like this video, and leave a comment telling me what you would do in our protagonist's situation. Your interaction gives me life. The drawing that undid a tycoon. The immediate shock. The rain beat against the glass of Alexander's office, but the loudest sound for him was the silence. Just 2 years prior, he had told the woman he loved, "If you have that baby, forget my number." He, the unbreakable real estate tycoon, Alexander Hayes, 35, thought control was everything. She, Ilara Vargas, 28, a talented architect who dreamed of a family, thought she had lost hers. Now, in sunny San Diego, California, under the sparkle of a fountain in Balboa Park, destiny had a low blow prepared. Alexander saw a child, a 2-year-old with his own curly brown hair and, most heartbreaking of all, his own piercing blue eyes. In that instant, his empire crumbled. He realized, with a pang of pain so deep it bent him, that he couldn't forget her, and much less forget what he had thrown away. The sentence in the glass office. Ilara never imagined that a single sentence could shatter her entire world. The memory of that day, 2 years ago in Alexander's luxurious corporate headquarters in the heart of Los Angeles, was etched in her mind. The smell of expensive coffee and cologne, the sterile silence, and above all, the coldness of his voice. She had been hopeful. She had imagined maybe a little panic, a nervous surprise, anything but this. She placed the small pregnancy test on the polished marble desk. His eyes, Alexander's, rested on the faint pink lines, then on her. For a fleeting second, Ilara swore she saw something, a spark of emotion, but it vanished faster than a bullet train. His voice, when it came, was calm and measured, the same tone he used when rejecting multi-million-dollar proposals. "If you have that baby, forget my number." The words cut her like sharp glass. She blinked, unable to breathe, waiting for him to retract them. Instead, he turned away, smoothing the cuff of his light blue shirt with mechanical precision. "You don't understand what this will do," he continued, his tone even colder. "To me, to my reputation, to everything I've built." Ilara felt her stomach clench. "You mean what it will do to your image?" He didn't respond, didn't even look at her. Something inside her broke. "I thought you wanted a family someday," she whispered. "I said I wanted control," he corrected her. "This is not part of the plan." The rain outside intensified, amplifying the dull beat of her own heart. She could barely see him through her tears. "Are you really just going to walk away?" "You'll do the right thing," he said quietly. "You always do." And he left, the door closing with a soft, final click that resonated louder than any scream. Interactive. Question: if you were in Ilara's shoes, what would hurt you more, the loss of love or the betrayal of trust? Leave me your opinion in the comments. Ilara quit her job at his firm. She moved. The hardest part wasn't the loneliness, but the loss of the future she thought she was building. The mornings were exhausting, but the nights, with her protective hand over the growing secret, were a weight of indescribable solitude. With time, she stopped looking for his name in the news. Every kick of the baby was a promise, she whispered in the dark. "You'll never feel alone, my love." The day of delivery arrived without flowers, without a father in the waiting room. But hearing her son's first cry, everything vanished. She held him, and looking into his eyes, his father's eyes, something broke and healed all at once. That night, under the dim light of the clinic in Valencia, Ilara made a vow. She would never beg. She would never chase the one who chose to leave. She would build her son a quiet life, and if Alexander ever realized what he had lost, it would be too late. She named her son The Spectre in Balboa Park. The next 2 years were a blur of determination and exhaustion. Ilara worked part-time at a small library in San Diego. Michael, fascinated by the world, became her light. He was curious, laughed heartily, and loved pointing at the sky. The word light was his favorite. Michael grew, and with him, the resemblance to his father. The same gestures, the same tilt of the head when thinking. They were tough moments. It was like seeing Alexander again, but without the cynicism. Innocent. She would whisper to him, "You'll be a better man than him." Life settled into a fragile rhythm. She had built a home with laughter and drawings on the fridge. On weekends, her safe place was Balboa Park, the sound of the fountain, the sun dancing on the water. But peace has a cruel way of ending when you least expect it. That afternoon, sitting on a bench, she saw a tall man across the plaza. A light gray bespoke suit. His brown hair caught the light. A chill ran through Ilara. No, it can't be him. But he turned around. Bam! Their eyes met. Everything froze. Alexander Hayes was there, as real as the day he left. Fear seized her, but it was too late. Alexander's eyes, those penetrating blue eyes, were no longer on her. They were fixed on the child, playing next to the fountain. Ilara watched the realization dawn on his face. He didn't move. He didn't blink. He was mesmerized by Michael's figure, who was, undeniably, a smaller, purer version of him. Ilara stood up instinctively, walking toward her son. Michael ran into her arms, laughing. "Mommy, look! The water is dancing!" Ilara was trembling. Over her son's shoulder, Alexander walked toward them, each step an eternity. When he stopped, his voice was barely a whisper. "Ilara, you have no right to be here," she said, pulling Michael closer. "You made your choice." Michael looked up. "Mommy, who is he?" Before Ilara could answer, Alexander knelt down. "An old friend," he said, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Hi, I'm Michael," the boy said proudly. Alexander's breath caught. Hearing his own childhood name pronounced by this little one was like a knife in his chest. He didn't need a DNA test. The truth was right there, looking back at him with his own eyes. Ilara took Michael's hand. "Let's go, sweetheart." She walked away, feeling his heavy, broken gaze on her back. Alexander stood paralyzed. He had spent years building an empire, but in a single afternoon, a child had completely undone his life. He felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Regret. The kind that settles in your bones. He wanted control, but he realized he had lost control of the only thing that mattered. Like this, if you think Alexander will finally have to work for what he lost. The signal in the darkness. The following days were an agony for Ilara. She couldn't shake the image of him. Broken. She tried to concentrate, but the fear of him trying to come back loomed over her. Meanwhile, Alexander wasn't sleeping either. The image of his son's face tormented him. He had convinced himself that leaving had been the right choice to protect his reputation. Now he understood the truth. He had been a coward. At dawn, he realized how hollow his success felt. Power meant nothing. He had loved her, and he had destroyed that love out of fear. He called his assistant, canceling all his meetings. He needed to find them, not to claim, but to see the life they had built without him. He found the address in a day. Alexander Hayes always had the means. Ilara was leaving the library when she saw the black sedan that didn't belong in her quiet neighborhood. Her stomach sank. "You shouldn't be here," she said. Her voice firm. He took a step forward. "I had to see you." "To talk about what?" She crossed her arms. "How you told me to forget your number, or how you decided a son wasn't part of your perfect life." Alexander winced. "I was wrong," he said simply. "Wrong? You think that word fixes everything?" "No, but maybe it's a start." She looked toward her apartment window, where Michael's small silhouette could be seen. You don't have the right to start over, Alexander. You left. I know, he said softly, his eyes glazed with a remorse she never thought she would see. And I've regretted it every day since. Before she could answer, Michael appeared at the door, holding a drawing. Mommy? Alexander turned, his breath catching. Michael smiled. Hello again. Alexander knelt down. You draw? Michael showed him the paper. It's a fountain. Mommy says it's our favorite place. Alexander took the drawing with trembling hands. It's perfect, he whispered. It's yours, she replied, her tone cold but shaky. Then she took Michael's hand and went inside. Alexander stood there, in the fading light, his son's drawing in his hand. For the first time in his life, he felt what true loss was. Do you think Alara should give Alexander a second chance, or should she keep him out of their lives to protect Michael? Comment below. A new beginning in the snow. Weeks passed. Alexander didn't show up directly again, but Alara felt his presence. Her broken car was anonymously repaired. The library received an anonymous donation for a new children's reading room. It infuriated her, this attempt to fix the irreparable with money. But it also made her wonder if he was changing. One cold afternoon in the park, Alexander approached cautiously. He looks happy, he said, his eyes fixed on Michael. He is. He deserves to be, Alara nodded. I don't expect you to believe me, but I've thought about you every day, he confessed. I was a coward. I thought emotions made you weak. When you told me you were pregnant, I panicked. It was the biggest mistake of my life. You can't rewrite history, she told him firmly. You left, and I built something without you. You can't expect me to forgive you. I know, I don't expect your forgiveness, but I need you to know I'm here. Not to fix it. Just here. Alara looked at Michael. If you're serious, you'll have to earn it. Not from me. From him. He doesn't need a stranger to show up and disappear again. I won't disappear, he promised. Did he trust? As the months went by, Alexander began to show up in small, constant ways, a volunteer at the community center of Michael's daycare. He never demanded. He learned patience. One snowy evening, at a charity event in a hotel in Boston, Alara and Michael watched a Christmas tree being lit. Mr. Alexander! Michael shouted, running toward him before Alara could stop him. Alexander knelt and picked him up. His eyes softened. Hi, champ. How are you? Can he stay with us, Mommy? Just for the tree lighting? Alara's heart clenched. She looked at Alexander, who was pleading silently with his eyes. She nodded. Only for the lighting. As the lights came on, and the tree burst into color, something broke between them. A fragile bridge of love shared by the same child. Later, as they said goodbye under the falling snow, Alexander told her, Thank you for letting me be here. Don't thank me, I did it for him. I know, but I'm still grateful. You really are trying, aren't you? Alara asked, her voice quiet. I am, he said, his voice raw. Not because I expect forgiveness, but because I can't live with who I was. Alara looked into Alexander's eyes, disarmed by his honesty. People don't change overnight, but they can choose not to cause more pain. That's where it begins. She got into the car and drove away, leaving Alexander under the snow, with a new resolution. To prove with actions that he was no longer the man who had left. Courage and forgiveness. The place of peace. Spring arrived, and with it, a truce. Alexander respected all boundaries, appearing gently in their lives. He joined them in the park, helping Michael fly a kite. Alara watched how her son laughed with him, how he looked up at him with admiration, and realized she couldn't keep them apart forever. One afternoon, while Michael played, Alexander sat next to her on the bench. You've done an incredible job with him, Alara. He's good, smart, self-assured, everything a child should be. She nodded. I did what I had to do, and I hate that I wasn't there, he said, his voice cracking. You can't rewrite the past, she said. but you can decide what kind of person you'll be now. I want to be the kind of man my son deserves, and maybe, someday, the kind of man you can forgive. Maybe someday, she whispered, but not because I owe you that, but because we both deserve peace. That night, for the first time, Ilara invited him to dinner at her small San Diego apartment. The three of them, squeezed around the table, listened to Michael's stories. When Michael fell asleep, Ilara and Alexander sat in the soft glow of the lamp. I used to think my punishment was living with the emptiness I created, Alexander said. But seeing you both, I realized that happiness is not something you're given. It's something you fight for, something you build piece by piece. He reached out and hesitantly placed his hand over hers. Ilara did not pull away. The touch was tentative, but it carried the weight of everything they had survived. "Thank you," he whispered. "Don't thank me yet," she said with a slight smile. "This is not forgiveness, Alexander. It's something else. A beginning, perhaps." Years later, in the same San Diego plaza, Alexander watched Ilara and Michael, now older, walking hand in hand. He smiled. The man who told her to forget his number was gone. In his place, there was someone who had learned to love without fear. Ilara turned to look at him, her smile soft and full of warmth. Alexander knew that the life he thought he didn't deserve was his, not because he had earned it perfectly, but because he had learned never to take it for granted. The shadow of a secret. Attention! If you're new here, be sure to watch the previous parts to understand this time jump. Subscribe and like if you think second chances are worth it. What if the past were a newspaper headline? 10 years had passed since the drawing of a fountain healed a wound that seemed fatal. Alexander Hayes, 45, was no longer just a tycoon. He was a present father, a husband. Yes, he finally married Ilara, and a transformed man. Ilara Vargas, 38, smiled with the peace she had fought for. Their life in San Diego was the picture of a family, warm, united, and bustling. But peace, often, is just the calm before the storm. Michael, the small hero of this story, was a brilliant boy, with his mother's curiosity and his father's strategic intelligence. He loved soccer, math, and above all, his parents. However, in the modern world, the past never sleeps. It browses the internet. One afternoon, while searching for a school project on business ethics, Michael found an old article. A yellowed press headline, dated 12 years prior, talking about the Alexander Hayes scandal. Clicking the link, he found an old photo of his father, younger and with a glacial expression. And then he found the quote, the phrase that took his breath away. "Young tycoon Alexander Hayes breaks off relationship with partner after unwanted pregnancy rumors, prioritizing his reputation." An insider quotes him, "If she has that baby, she can forget my number." Michael's world stopped. That phrase, that pain. It couldn't be. He wasn't part of an unwanted baby. His father, the man who taught him humility, who took him to practice, who read him stories, was the same one who had said that. Michael's heart sank, feeling the weight of a secret that didn't belong to him. The truth didn't hurt as much as the feeling that the story of his own existence had been hidden from him. The reconstruction of a hero. That night, Michael was unusually quiet during dinner. Ilara, his mother, noticed the tension in his face. Alexander, his father, asked him about the school project. "It's fine, Dad," Michael said, his voice strangely formal, without meeting his eyes. "It's just about ethics and the decisions people make." The atmosphere became heavy. Alexander and Ilara exchanged a quick glance, a silent understanding that only survivors of shared trauma can have. They had planned to tell Michael the story when he was older, but the past has its own timing. Later, Alexander sat next to Michael on his bed, where the boy pretended to read. "What's wrong, champ?" Alexander asked gently. "You seem distant." Michael slammed the book shut. The innocence had disappeared from his blue eyes, replaced by confusion and premature pain. "Is it true?" Michael asked, barely a whisper. "That you told Mom to forget your number if she had me?" The question fell like a bomb. Alexander gasped. He saw the newspaper headline reflected in his son's eyes and knew there was no way to dodge the truth. "Yes, Michael, it's true," Alexander admitted, his voice choked with emotion and regret. "I said those words, the cruelest, stupidest words I have ever spoken." Michael felt tears burn in his eyes. "But why, Dad? Didn't I matter? Just your reputation?" Interactive question. If you were Alexander, how would you explain the fear, immaturity, and panic you felt at that moment to your 12-year-old son without justifying your mistake? Share your words in the comments. Alexander sat on the edge of the bed and took his son's hands, his throat tight. "When you were born, I was a lost man. A man who believed that control was the only important thing. The fear of losing that control turned me into a monster, Michael. I wasn't a good man. I chose pride over love, money over my family. But I want you to know something," Alexander continued, his eyes filled with tears. "Your mom was the strongest person in the world. She didn't bend. She chose you. And when I saw you for the first time, playing by the fountain in Balboa Park," he paused to control his emotions. "In that moment, the man who said that phrase vanished. He broke. You saved me, Michael. You weren't a mistake. You were the only real thing in my fake life. That's why I've spent every day of the last 10 years trying to be the father you deserve. Trying to be a man good enough for your mom to give me a second chance." Michael absorbed the words, seeing the vulnerability and pain on his father's face, a pain he had never seen on the unbreakable Alexander Hayes. "And why did you hide it from me?" "Because it's the story of my failure, son, not yours. We wanted to tell you at the right time, so you would understand it from a place of strength, not from a secret. We missed the opportunity, and I am deeply sorry." Michael let out a long, shaky sigh. It was too much for a 12-year-old. But looking at his father, he didn't see the cruel tycoon from the newspaper, but the man who had knelt before him, asking for forgiveness. "So, the fountain is important," Michael whispered. "The fountain is the place where the bad man disappeared, and where your dad finally began to be born," Alexander said, smiling through his tears. "It's the place of our second chance." That night, Ilara joined them. The three hugged, a hug that wasn't perfect, but it was real. The secret, finally exposed, didn't destroy the family, but anchored it more firmly in honesty. Epic conclusion, the legacy of a hero. 10 years later, at Michael's college graduation in the historic city of Austin, he became the person his mother had wanted him to be. An ethical, kind, and deeply aware man of the value of second chances. At the end of his speech, Michael looked at his parents. "My father taught me math and business. My mother taught me architecture and empathy. But together, they taught me the most important lesson, that you are not defined by where you start, but by where you choose to finish." My story began with a mistake, with a cruel phrase, but it was rewritten with a drawing, with humility, and with 10 years of unconditional love. Thank you for fighting for me, for fighting for the man I became. The applause was deafening. Ilara smiled with tears in her eyes, and Alexander, the man who once feared losing control, wept openly. Finally free. The true legacy, what a powerful ending. A father's true legacy isn't money, but the courage to admit a mistake. Subscribe and share. If this story gave you hope that personal growth is possible, share this video with a friend. Like it. Show us your appreciation for Michael's courage in confronting his parents' past. Final question. If you could talk to the Alexander of 12 years ago, what would you tell him to make him reconsider? Leave your comment below and be part of this story. Thank you for being part of this journey. See you in the next story of redemption, the day of the time capsule. Attention! This is the final conclusion of our powerful story of redemption. If you've made it this far, subscribe and like as a thank you to Alara's unbreakable strength. What do we save when pain becomes legacy? 17 years had passed since that rainy afternoon in Los Angeles. Alara Vargas, 45, was no longer the ambitious architect seeking a man's approval. She was the successful founder of Light and Roots, a sustainable architecture firm with projects throughout the U.S. Her latest achievement, designing a new community center and public plaza in the heart of San Diego, right where an old office building once stood. Today, on Inauguration Day, the plaza was packed. TV cameras were rolling. Alara was on the stage, with her husband Alexander, 52, and her son Michael, 17, a tall and thoughtful young man, by her side. The center had been financed, in part, by a generous anonymous donation, from Alexander, of course, who now channeled his wealth into repairing communities, not just his image. The great moment arrived, the unveiling of the central plaza, culminating in a majestic, modern fountain. Seeing the fountain, Alexander's throat tightened. It wasn't the old park fountain, but the water rose with the same promise of hope. Michael smiled at his parents, understanding the deep significance. But Alara, the silent protagonist of this story, had one main intellect. The legacy in the fountain. Alara took the podium. Her voice was calm, but it resonated with the authority that only experience grants. Many years ago in this city, I lost a vision of my future, she began, looking directly at the camera. I thought I had lost my career, my love, and my way. I found my strength in a park, next to a fountain, and in the love of a son, to whom I promised a world where love wouldn't have to hurt. She paused, smiling toward Alexander, who nodded, his eyes filled with pride and gratitude. Today, we inaugurate this plaza. I haven't just called it Light and Roots because of the design. I named it that because I believe that even in the darkness, people can find their own light and develop strong roots. Then, Alara turned toward a small, polished marble slab near the base of the new fountain. Today, we will bury a time capsule. This capsule is dedicated to all those who have ever felt lost, to those who fought alone, and to those who chose the path of redemption. She knelt and slowly revealed the contents of the titanium box, a child's drawing of a fountain. The turning point, the reminder of the innocence that saved his father. A business card of Alexander Hayes, CEO, the symbol of the arrogance and fear that was buried. A pregnancy test, the symbol of the moment that broke Alara's world and forced the reconstruction. A note from Alara, a message from 17 years ago to her past self. Interactive question. If you could put one object in that time capsule to remember a crucial moment in your life, what would you put in? Tell us in the comments. Alara picked up the note with steady hands. I wrote this the night Alexander left my office, in the clinic in Valencia, after swearing I would never beg anyone. She read, her voice slightly trembling. To the future, Alara. Fear is a liar. He left and told you to forget his number. Never forget it. Not for the pain, but because that pain reminded you who you are. Go alone if necessary, but go strong. Never bend, never beg, and never let fear steal your light. You have Michael. That's all you need. Signed, Alara, the night she became a single mother. The crowd was silent. Then, with a radiant smile, she turned to Alexander and handed him a small business card. A new one, with his name and the title, president of the Second Act Community Foundation. And finally, I ask Alexander to put this in. Alexander took the card. It was a symbol of his new identity, of the man he was now. He gently kissed her on the forehead, with a gratitude that surpassed words. "Thank you for the second chance, my love," he whispered. As they buried the capsule under the marble slab, a reporter shouted to Alexander, "Mr. Hayes, what is the most important legacy you leave your son?" Alexander, looking at Michael, who was already his father's height, replied with a deep, clear voice, without a trace of the old coldness, "That success is not measured by what you build, but by what you are willing to deconstruct to truly love. My legacy is not my company. It is my regret, because regret taught me to stay." Ilara took his hand, the same hand that had once been withdrawn from her. She smiled. Her world was no longer defined by a phrase of rejection, but by an entire life of commitment. She had won. Final message. What a beautiful ending. This story reminds us that true empowerment comes from self-acceptance and the courage to rewrite our own narrative. Subscribe and hit the bell. If you believe Ilara is the true heroine of this story for her resilience, like and share. Help us bring this message of hope and redemption to more hearts. Final reflection. What do you think was the most important moment in Alexander's redemption? Comment below, and thank you for following this story. Until next time, Michael's Rule, the inherited fear of commitment. Attention viewers, welcome to the epilogue you've all been waiting for. If you've followed Alexander and Ilara's saga, subscribe and like to find out if Michael's love can break the cycle of fear of commitment. Can the tycoon's son and the architect's son escape the past? 8 years had passed since graduation. Michael Hayes Vargas, 25, was a handsome, intelligent man and had forged a successful career in San Francisco in the green technology sector, far from his father's traditional spotlights. He carried his mother Ilara's warmth and his father Alexander's strategic focus. He was the ideal boyfriend. Except for one thing, the no-commitment rule. Michael dated people, but always kept an emotional distance. He feared the idea of making an forever promise, a feeling inherited from his parents' painful history. He had seen his father take 16 years to repair a phrase. Michael didn't want to risk inflicting that kind of pain. But life has its own way of challenging our rules. Her name was Sophia, a graphic design artist with a free spirit and bright eyes. They met at the Golden Gate Park, and Sophia quickly broke down Michael's defenses with her authenticity and kindness. After 6 wonderful months, everything became too good. Michael felt the familiar unease. Their relationship was moving toward the stage where he always ended things, the promise stage. One evening, on the balcony of Sophia's apartment in the Mission District, she handed him a key. "This is your key," she said, smiling. "No obligations. It's just so you don't have to call at 3 a.m. Michael felt an invisible wall crumbling. He looked at the key in his hand, but his mind traveled 25 years back, to Los Angeles, to the small pregnancy test on the desk. "If you have that baby, forget my number." His father's phrase, though repaired, was still a ghost. "Sophia, thank you, but I think we should slow down," Michael said, his voice rough. Sophia didn't get angry. She simply looked at him sadly. "Michael, you're not slowing down. You're running away," she said, placing her hand over his. "Everything between us is perfect, but just when you feel the forever, you back off. What are you afraid of? Commitment? Or the fear of becoming the man your father once was?" Michael before his own court. Sophia's words hit him right in the bullseye. Michael returned home that weekend to San Diego, seeking counsel in the place where his story began. His family. He found his father, Alexander, in his study. Not with contracts, but with an old book. "Dad, I need to talk," Michael began, recounting the story of the key and his paralysis. I'm afraid of making an irreparable mistake. I'm afraid that if I commit, at some point, I'll want to take back the promise like you did with Mom, Michael confessed. Alexander listened in silence. He saw in his son the same fear of his youth, but wrapped in responsibility. Son, Alexander said, closing the book, I've told you that my legacy was regret. It took me almost 2 decades to repair the mistake of a moment of cowardice. You are doing the opposite. You are letting my fear dictate your life. Alexander stood up and walked toward the window, looking out at the garden. I wanted to have absolute control, and when love appeared, I expelled it. I said that phrase to your mother. It was my biggest mistake. But I'll also tell you this. Your mother didn't forgive me for what I said. She forgave me for what I did afterward. Michael, love is not control. It's the freedom to choose to stay. It's not about never making a mistake, but about committing to repairing them. Interactive question. In your opinion, should Michael rely on his parents' painful experience to be cautious, or should he forge his own path without the shadow of the past? Comment your thoughts. Ilara walked in, hearing the last words. She hugged Michael. Sweetheart, she said softly. Your father made a terrible mistake, but that's not who you are. You are the man who has spent his whole life proving that commitment is real. You are afraid of hurting Sophia, and that is proof that you are not that man. Commitment is not a shackle, it's a key, Ilara said, looking at her son's hand, where Sophia's key lay. Michael's commitment. Michael returned to San Francisco with a new clarity. He understood that he couldn't let the fear of a past generation dictate his happiness. He went to Sophia's apartment. She was sitting at her desk, working, with the key he had given her on the table. I'm here, Michael said. Sophia smiled weakly. You don't have to say anything, Michael. You've already said everything. Michael walked over, took the key, and put it in his pocket. Then he knelt. There was no diamond ring, just an old key box. Sophia, he said, his eyes shining. My parents taught me that commitment is not a perfect promise, but a daily choice to stay, to repair, and to fight for each other. I was afraid of commitment because I was afraid of my own failure. But I love you, and I promise you this. I will make mistakes, but I commit to always repairing them. He opened the small box. Inside was not a ring, but a small silver key engraved with the image of a flame, a symbol of change and light. This is the key to my heart, Sophia. I can't promise I'll never hurt you, but I promise I will never leave. Let's make our home eternal. Sophia wept, not from pain, but from the courage he had shown. Yes, Michael. Yes, I want to make our home eternal, she said, smiling through her tears, holding the key. They hugged, and in that embrace, Michael broke the cycle of fear. He not only committed to Sophia, but to himself. He became the man his father took half a lifetime to be, a man capable of loving fully,